Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2024 library tour. In this video, I'm moving from the open-ended shelving unit that I use as a double-sided bookcase to the bookcase that my brother built over here. Um, so this is part 9 of Science Fiction and Fantasy, Fear and Loathing in New Crobuzon. So my brother built this bookcase in 2018 because I was in desperate need of a new bookcase at the time because one of the bookcases I had fell apart as I was moving it from the living room to this bedroom, my little book room. Um, and so I've had it for 6 years now, and it's not terribly well put together, so I've been thinking about replacing it at some point in the future, although that would be next year at the earliest. Anyway, let's get to the books I have on these two third shelves. So this bookcase has three very long shelves and two considerably shorter shelves, and those two shorter shelves are what I'm going to be getting to today. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, I will do the longer shelves. So let's get going with a duology, or at least I think it's a duology still. The first book in the series is called the first book is called A Memory Called Empire. The second book is A Desolation Called Peace, both by Arkady Martine. So, A Memory Called Empire is about a young woman who is deeply in love with the culture of a local interstellar empire. The empire is both militaristically, economically, and most importantly, culturally imperialistic. And so this young woman is sent to serve as an ambassador and to figure out what happened to her predecessor. She learns that her predecessor has been murdered, and so she's trying to figure out who killed him, what was he up to at the time of his death, trying to navigate the relations between her home station and this empire, imperial politics, including uh, a succession crisis and a coup attempt. And I have tried to like this book on several reads, and I just don't. There is one great scene at the climax that is amazing, but for the most part, I don't care for A Memory Called Empire. And I bailed on A Desolation Called Peace fairly quickly. This book is a follow up that focuses on a looming threat that was lurking through the first book. The next book is another one I did not get on with. Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. So this is a young adult space opera about a young prince in an interstellar empire who is directed to step in for a cousin who has basically this young prince is set to marry a cousin's husband due to the cousin's death, and trying to sort of seal diplomatic relations. I did not care for it at all. It just, I don't particularly do well with young adult. Next is The Many Colored Land by Julian May. This is the first book in a long running series. It's about um, sort of advanced humans thousands of years in the future who have developed psychic abilities, who some of whom, for some odd reason, have grown bored with their life. So they use a newly discovered or developed time portal to travel hundreds of thousands of years into the past. There, they discovered that Earth has been colonized by uh, an alien species, and that these humans who are going back into the past are being enslaved. Although there is no way to um, get word back because the portal is a one-way trip. I'm not entirely sure what the obsession is with this kind of story, but um, I do know Steve Donahue really enjoys this book. He showcases it several times a year during book tours and stuff. I think just recently in his kitchen tour. So the next three books are the first two books in the War for the Rose Throne series by Peter McLean. Uh, Priest of Bones, Priest of Lies, and Priest of Gallows. So, um, the War for the Rose Throne series is basically Peaky Blinders, the fantasy. It's about a criminal named Thomas Piety who has gone off to war, and on his return discovers that his territories have been taken. And so he starts a new version of his gang, the Pious Men, with the men and women who were in his military unit. Before the war, Thomas worked for the Queensmen, a secret intelligence organization that draws him back in to combat foreign influence in the criminal underworld of the city that Thomas calls home. Um, Gradually, Thomas himself becomes a Kingsman in the second book, and then in the third book is an active Queensman. Um, I really like the first two books, even if the second book has a not a very enjoyable middle. But I hate the third book so much that I don't think I'm ever probably going to read the first two books ever again. Next is the three volumes in the new Crobuzon series by China Mieville. Perdido Street Station, The Scar, and annoyingly, Iron Council. Annoyingly, because I have this one as a trade paperback and these two as mass markets. So, Perdido Street Station completely changed the way I thought about fantasy. Perdido Street Station is a mix of new weird, steampunk, um, horror. It is a so much and told in such a unique way, a way that I had never experienced before. It's the story of a rogue scientist in the city state of New Crobuzon, who is commissioned to to discover a way for a mutilated Garuda, a birdman, to fly again. As Isaac does research on flying things, he accidentally unleashes a nightmarish species of moth on the city that eats dreams and leaves people comatose. Um, and these moths also produce a form of milk that can be turned into a drug. So this also brings down the wrath of local criminal organizations. And it's a wild and crazy ride that does not necessarily stick the landing, which is, I think, a habit of Mieville, was a aspect of Mieville's work. The sequel, The Scar, is about an old uh, girlfriend of the main character from the first book who has fled New Crobuzon for the colonies. When her ship is attacked and incorporated into the pirate city state of Armada, um, she finds her linguistic capabilities and talents called on to allow for a long running project in Armada to proceed, which could very well see the destruction of the city. And of course, there's also looming conflict with New Crobuzon. Um, the third book, Iron Council, is set decades later, where when New Crobuzon is at war with a rival city state. At the same time, there is a burgeoning revolt in the city, and some old time revolutionaries are returning to the city on a city state that is also a train. This is the weakest, I think, of the three. The next two books are standalones by Sam J. Muller. First is Blackfish City. This is a near future um, climate fiction, um, apocalyptic, dystopic science fiction novel about a city composed of oil rigs. Not necessarily oil rigs, but imagine like an entire city composed of oil rigs. Um, that is sort of teetering on the brink of chaos. There is a virus that is very similar to AIDS that is sort of affects people's memory. They sort of like inject other memories into the victims and other things. And there's also revenge. Several characters have wronged others, and so they take revenge. So when I first read the book in 2018, I quite liked it, but a subsequent rereading left me very cold. So, and I haven't gone back to it since. So, this is probably one of those books that the one reading was enough. I considerably disliked the other book by Sam J. Miller I have more. And that is The Blade Between. Um, so, this is a horror novel set roughly contemporaneously about a young man, or not so young man, who returns to his hometown to take care of his father's uh, last remaining bits of sort of affairs. When he reconnects with his childhood or his teenage boyfriend and gets into political trouble with that ex-boyfriend's wife, all the while sort of rekindling their affair. Um, and then there's some horror thing going on. I did not stick around too long to figure out what it was because the book is terrible. It is horribly written. Just so the next two books are the first two volumes in the Land Fit for Heroes series by Richard K. Morgan. The Still Remains and The Cold Commands. So the series is about a trio of heroes who won a previous epic conflict who are now facing a new epic conflict or something like that. It's been a very long time since I've read the series, and it increasingly becomes more science fiction and tied into Morgan's other science fiction work. Um, so I rather liked The Still Remains the first time I read it. Did not particularly care for The Cold Commands. I'm not entirely sure why I have it. And I really don't know if I'm ever going to come back to these. So the next batch of books are by Michael Moorcock. Hopefully this other shelf does not fall apart while I'm doing this, because it is very wobbly. One of many design flaws on this bookcase, which is one of the reasons why I do want a new one. So this is Hawk Moon, The Tale of the Eternal Champion, Volume 3. So it's a bind-up that includes The Jewel in the Skull, The Med-God's Amulet, The Sword of the Dawn, and The Rune Staff. I think I might have had to go at this book, or one of these, years and years ago before I actually bought it, and kind of let it go, which is a bail before I knew what bails were. I also have Dangers at the End of Time, which is the 7th volume of the Eternal Champion, and includes An Alien Heat, The Hollow Lands, and The End of All Songs, which I have not got to any of these yet. I also have a number of individual works, some of which are Elric stories. This is a Stormbringer, which I have not got to. The Sailor on the Seas of Fate. I actually really quite like that outfit. The Vanishing Tower. Count Brass, the first book of the Chronicles of Castle Brass. The Champion of Garethorm, which is the second book in the Castle Brass series. The Bull and the Spear, the fourth book of Quorum. And I have Tales from the End of Time, which is, I don't know. Which is, I'm guessing, a 2-volume bind-up of Legends from the End of Time and The Messiah at the End of Time. I haven't gotten to most of these yet, or pretty much all of them. The next 3 books, and the 3 books that will finish off this shelf, are by C.L. Moore. First up is Jirel of Joyery. This is one of the first sword and sorcery stories led by a female protagonist. I'm not the biggest fan of the Jirel of Joyery series. In fact, I don't particularly care for them at all, because while Black God's Kiss is interesting, it's basically repeated in every other Jirel of Joyery story, and that repetition just bugs me. I also have, sorry about that, Northwest Smith, which is, I think, a collection of all of the Northwest Smith stories. And I also have Judgment Night, which is another collection of short stories. So that concludes Shelf 9 of Science Fiction and Fantasy. I will be back with part 10 soon. So until then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.